So the last time let's quickly take a look at what we did the last time. So I'm going to go ahead and open my Anaconda distribution, which is what we use for learning purpose. Give it a while to load. Okay, so what we use generally is Jupyter Lab. So let me quickly open Jupyter Lab. We can use either Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, but I always prefer either of them is fine. I don't even prefer anyone. They both do the same thing. They both do the same thing. Okay, our folder is okay. See, it's just opening, but you know how to get to the directly where your folder is. Your file is actually in. My file is actually in my project in desktop. So let me just quickly navigate there. Is it there? Okay, I'm already in my project. So learning Python. This is my file, and it's currently opened here. So before I start to run any code, I'm first going to rerun the kernel, which is this which is this circle arrow button. So once I click that, I restart the kernel so that everything would we start from the beginning. I just rerun my code till we get to the end. I'm doing this by holding down Shift Enter. Oh, I've over. Okay. Okay. So the last time we spoke, we talked. The last time we met, we actually discussed dictionary, and we also looked at a few string functions. For example, we said I told you that a dictionary contains both a key and a value. I told you a key is mostly on the left side, and I did not mention that it is actually an immutable object in Python, because you cannot put a list as a key, but you can put a tuple as a key. Now we looked at certain list operations. We looked at appending to a list. We looked at finding the length of a list. We looked at removing from a list. We looked at sorting a list. Okay, I don't think we looked at reverse. Now when you sort a list, hello, does someone want to ask something? Okay, so basically what I'm saying is this. Why does it pick up now? Okay, so I said that when you're working with lists, you can append, you can sort, you can find a particular item in the list, you can remove from the list, you can find the length, you can find the type, that's the type, you can strip left, you can strip right, you can find out if a particular string is numeric, if it is alphanumeric, if it is alpha, if it is whatever. Then I also told you how to look through a dictionary. I told you that a dictionary is made up of key and value. So if you are looking through a dictionary, you need to look by key and values. So the for loop that I used to look through this particular dictionary here is I looked at for key and value. You can use, like I said before, you can actually use any variable as the indexes that you want to look at. You can say for kv in my dictionary dot items. It will print out all the values of all the keys and the print v is supposed to print. Sorry. This thing takes, I don't know, sometimes it misbehaves like that. If I say print v, normally it should print the value of the dictionary. That it should print the name, it should print the age, and it should print the country. Now what we want to do is we want to take a deeper dive into for loops. Now in for loops there are two functions called continue and break. Two functions called continue and break. Now let me give an example. Let's say I have a list. Let's say my list equals 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now I want to write a for loop. I want to loop through my list. I want to print out every element or every indexed item in my list. Now the pattern is still the same. I will say for I item in my list. I told you the I is something I constructed. It's not written in stone in Python. In my list, I simply say for I in my list. Okay, I forgot my colon. Now for I in my list, now I want to say print I. Supposed to run. Why is this thing doing like this? Ugh. So oh goodness. So let me use my dict is not defined. Hold on. Okay, so let's run this code again. It's supposed to run. Okay. Now you notice here that I have defined my list as a particular list. I told you lists are as enclosed in square brackets. Then I told you that for I in my list, print I. That means I want to print each and every single element in this particular list. That means I want to print 1, I want to print 2, I want to print 3, I want to print 4, 5, 6, like that. Now, so what I printed, I printed every element. Now, let's try something. Now, let's say for I in my list. Now, what if I wanted to give a condition that whenever it encounters 2, it should skip 2 and go to the next index. Now, let's add another 2 here. Let's say there's 2 here. Now, what do? I'll say for I in my list, I'll now add another if. I'll say if my list I, that means for the index I, is equal to, remember double equal to, is equal to 2, continue. Else, print I. Let's see if it will run. Like I told you, I might have made a mistake somewhere. You see I made a mistake. My list underscore is missing. Okay, let's try that. Okay, sorry, let's just say if I is equal to 2. If I, okay. Now, you notice here that what it printed is simply telling me that now it went to the first element, which is 1. Now, 1 is not 2. 1 is not equal to 2. So it printed 1. It went to the if condition and said that if I is equal to 2. Now, in this case, I is not 2. I is 1. So it will go to the else statement and print I. Now, it goes to the next element. The next element in this list is 2. He said if I is equal to 2, continue. I is equal to 2. You notice here that it did not print 2. Continue means that go back to the beginning of the loop and continue to the next element. It does not mean continue and goes to the beginning. It means continue to the next element. Now, let's try something else. Let's assume I copy this same code. I don't want us to do something different. Let's copy the same code. Let's paste it here. Now, let's say I now change this to break. You'll notice what will happen so that we can understand the difference between both of them. Now, notice here, in the first case, I used continue. It's whenever I got to the element 2, it skipped it and goes to the next element. But now, when I use break, whenever I go to the first element, which is 2, it breaks out of the loop. Now, break automatically breaks you out of the for loop. But continue goes to the next element in the for loop. Hope it makes sense. If you have any question, please ask. Hope it makes sense. It's very important to understand it because while coding, while building our first app, we are going to use it. We most definitely will use it. Please, if you understand what I just said, please say yes so that we can move on. Oh, wonderful. Okay, now this is for break and continue. Continue means that it skips that element and moves to the next element. Break means that it skips the loop totally once it encounters that particular element. Sometimes you may want to use it. Sometimes I may have a database of maybe 1,000 employees, and I want to, every time I get to a particular employee that the particular condition is, when the particular condition is met, I want it to skip that employee and go to the next one. I can use continue. What if it gets to a point and I want to stop the loop from continuing? Then I will use a break. You see the use cases. Continue means you want to skip a particular element. Break means that you want to break out of the for loop entirely. Hope it makes sense. if you have any question, please ask before I move on. I'm going into function. After function, I will leave this IDE entirely. You can still continue to learn with this IDE, but I'll move from this IDE. I'll start using Visual Studio Code, because there, what we want to do then, that is what will fit it. Are we there? All right. Now, let's move into functions. Let me just type here functions. Okay. Let's make this, should I mark it down? Nah. Let's make it raw. Oh, I thought I saw. Okay, let's make it a raw information. You guys know what this means, right? Let me mark it down. Okay, you know what this means, right? This simply means that whenever I use this drop down menu, simply means that if I choose code, it means that Jupyter Lab will see whatever I've typed as a code, which means it will treat it in line with codes. But if I choose Markdown, it means I'm using it as a topic. So it will not run it as a code, it will just put it up as a topic. So I want to use function as a topic and not a code. That's why I changed it to Markdown. But in this case now, I'll be using code, because whatever I'm going to run here will be a code. Now, in Python, to define a function, you use the keyword def. That's def, basically. Now, to be def, which is, you are telling Python that I want to define a function, which I'll term def. Then the function I want to define is called run me. Let's just use anything. You can use anything. Run me, and it will not take in any variable. I will explain that to you very, very soon. Now, I've defined a function, run me. I'm saying every time I call on this function, do whatever is stated in that function. Now, this function, I want you to do just one thing. I want you to print the name, run me. Are you seeing that? Now, I have defined a function. Right now, the function doesn't do anything. But now, what if I wanted to use what is in this function? What I simply need to do is, I simply say, run me. Have you seen what happened? Now, I've done two things. I have defined a function. The function is called run me. I said def is the keyword used to define functions. The same way you write for, or you write if, or you write list in some cases when you need to, or you write dot sort. This is just a keyword saying run def. Def means that I am running a particular function. Then the function I want to write is called run me. That's the title of the function. And that function will not take in any variables, which means it is an empty function, more like it's not taking any variable. But what the function is basically going to do is that it's going to print run me, which means every time I call on this function, it's going to print the line run me. Which means for me to call that function run me now, all I need to type is run underscore me open bracket. Now you'll notice here, in this particular kind of function, I cannot assign it to a variable. Do you know why I cannot assign it to a variable? Because this function is not returning any value. It is simply saying run me, print run me. So you cannot assign a print to a variable. You cannot say a is equal to run me open bracket close bracket then say print a. It doesn't make any sense, because the function itself is carrying out that particular action, which is what? Print run me. Now another one is this. Now what if I wanted my function to return a particular variable? Now let's do this. The same keyword def add okay, let's say add two, let's call it add two numbers. Remember I told you that it is very important that whenever you are writing in Python, you follow a particular order. I told you Python looks at spaces or indentation, what we call indentation. You notice here, whenever I put a colon after a particular line in Python, I always automatically if I click down, it always creates a tab space between the beginning of that particular line and the next line. It is very important. If it is not complete, your code will not run. I cannot do this. This doesn't make any sense. It will throw an error, because it's telling me indentation error, expected an indented block. But now I did not indent anything. So what I do is this. You see that it's running properly. Now, this next function is adding two numbers. Now, the two numbers I want to add are a and b. Let's say a equals 5. You can do that. You can do whatever you want in your function. B equals 6. I told you the spaces between my a and the equal to, and the spaces between my equal to and what I have assigned to a are not very important, but because of readability of code, it's good you apply some certain principles, like adding space between things in Python. Now let's go on. Now, oh sorry, I used okay. Now let's say I want this code to return well, let's just do this. Let's say C equals A plus B. Remember my spacing, very important. Now let's say this will return C. Have you seen that? Now nothing happens. Now you notice the difference between my first function and this function. The first function, I did not add a keyword again called return. Now return means that this particular function is returning a value at the end of the day. So if you run this function, a value will come with this function. Now let's pick up this function. You still remember how to pick up a function or to use a function. We simply say add. Let's say we can now assign. We can say b equals add, or let's use z. I don't want them to coincide. Z equals add two numbers. Then open close. Then let's say we print z. Let's see if it will run. Have you seen that? Now you will notice here that the value for z is the value for z now is, we are saying z is add two numbers. It doesn't take in any variables. Now add two number, what does add two number do? It picks up a variable a, which we have hard-coded as a is equal to 5. Then it picks up the variable b, which we have hard-coded as variable b is equal to 6. Then we now said in the same function that this function, we want you to return the value c, which is the sum of a and b. So we are saying return c. So now what we are saying simply is that z, we now said in the next line in our Jupyter notebook, we now said z is equal to add two numbers. The add two numbers is already our function. Now you will notice that after I call on add two numbers, I added a bracket in there, which means I opened opening bracket and closing bracket, which is empty because our function is supposed to be empty. Then I now said print z. Z will print the returned value of the function, which is c. I will make hey okay. I thought I closed it. Please, if you have any question here, please ask. We will be using functions a whole lot. Everything we do in Python, we will be using functions. When we get to Django, which we will get to by tomorrow, by the grace of God, we will be using functions. Please, if you have any question concerning this, please ask. Please do well to ask. Do well to ask. I'm waiting on. If you don't have any questions, simply type yes or type no, whatever you want to type. Hello. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's move on. Now, remember I have defined two functions. They take in no values. Now, what if we want to define a function that takes in, like, say, two values? Now, see what will happen. Let's define a def. Let's call this function with value. Let's say it takes in two values, value A and value B. Sorry, mistake. Okay, now what we want to do is we have created two functions. We simply want the function to add up the two values. We simply say this function should return A plus B. Okay, have you seen that? You see there is a difference. Now in the bracket of the function I've added two values, which are the values A and values B. So now what do I want to do? I want to call this function. Remember how to call this function. I will now say C equals function with values. Function, I'll simply say function with value. open bracket. Now, I cannot call this function by putting an empty open bracket. You see what will happen. We'll now say print, let's just say I print C. It's giving us an error. Now, see the kind of error it's giving us. It's telling us it is a type error. It's saying function with value missing two required positional arguments, A and B. You notice inside the function we have created two variables inside when we are defining that function, which are A and B, which means whenever I am going to call this function, those two values have to be there, which means I have to say something. I can do something like this. 5, I can say 5 and 6. So what it will do is it will simply add 5 and 6. Have you seen that? It is giving me 11. Now, what if I now do this? Problem. Now, the function is looking for two values. I have given the function 3 values. We will get there, slow and steady. Now, this function is taking only 2 values. If we want it to take more than 2 values, there's a way we define it. But for now, let's stick with this. Now, I have defined a function, which is function with values. I have added 2 values to it. Abi? Now, I have said that this function should return the 2 values after they have been added together. Now, I created a new variable, which is called C, and I assigned to C that function with the 2 values and say, okay, apply that function on these 2 values and print out the value for me, the value of whatever I've assigned. So see what I mean? Now, you have 11. Now, what does function do for us? It makes for code reusability. Now, what do I mean by code reusability? Now, in the sense that if I've declared a function here that adds up 2 numbers, which means whenever I want to add up 2 numbers, I can always call this function. Anywhere in the code, I can always say D is equal to function with values, then I put 2 numbers, automatically to add it for me. Instead of every time I say D is equal to this, B is equal to 5, and always add up and do so many things. So function makes for code reusability, which means that it makes your code reusable. Instead of having to write the same line of code over and over and over, you don't need to. Just create a function for whatever you want to do. Every time you need to call to do that particular action, you just call up that function instead of rewriting the code. Now, another thing is this. What if I did this? Sorry. Okay. Now, what if I declared only one value? There's a problem. I'm sure there's a problem. It is requiring a positional argument B. Now, what if I just wanted the value of B? Even if you do not put any value for B, I want the value of B to always be a particular value. They're more like a default value. I can simply say B is equal to 2. Now, see what happens. Now, if I do not declare B, sorry. Now, if I do not declare B, it prints 7 because I've said the default value of B is 2. But what if now I now want to change the value of B? All I need to do is just come down here and put 7 here. Have you seen that? You notice that it has not taken 2 as the value of B. Rather, it has taken 7. Now, this 2 means that even if I do not put any value in the function, it should always use a default value for B, which is 2. I can do the same for A. Hope we are making sense so far. If you have any question, please ask. I stopped sharing. It says I'm presenting. It shows that I'm presenting. Can anybody see my screen? Okay. Please, can you see it now? Okay, wonderful. All right. So let's move on. Now, what if I want any, you should be able to put any values in your function, but you will hardly use this because most of the time you always define the value that you want to be put in your function. You can't just tell anybody that print anything for my function. No, it doesn't work that way. So you always want to define what will go into your function. For example, you may say you want 3 positional arguments, or you want 2 positional arguments, or you may want to define, but if you want to take in any value into your function, you simply do this. You type def as usual. Let's call this any value. Any value. Then it takes in, you now do this. Ask. Have you seen what else did? print, but most times I hardly ever use this in code anyway. Print hello world. Okay, then let's do this. Then let's say any value, or return, let's say it returns a value. Return 5. Let's say it returns 5. Let's say C equals any value. I can make this empty. I can just make it empty and print C. Now, have you seen that? It is printing. Why am I printing hello world? Okay, it is printing 5 because I said I have told you that even if I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, it will still print the same thing. So which means that this is allowing me to put multiple values into my code. The kind of value you want to use is what you will define. For example, if you say it's taking A and it's taking B, and you want A to be a list. Remember, Python does not want you to. You don't need to define a variable type. For example, let's say I want to define another value. Define lists function. Let's just call it list function. Let's say it takes A and it takes in B. Remember, we always define it. Then let's take for example. Now we know that, okay, somebody is asking something. Any reason why return doesn't have a parenthesis? Very wonderful question. Very, very good question. Okay, now return doesn't have a parenthesis because you can put it in bracket actually, but it doesn't matter. You can put it in brackets. You can put it. It doesn't matter. You can see that. You can see I've put it. I can put it in bracket. The parenthesis does not really matter for return, but for print you must put it. Remember, you can put it in bracket if you want. If you want your code to be clean, but it doesn't do anything. You know, most times if you are going to use bracket, it means that probably you want to multiply more than one thing or more than two things. You understand? Now, functions are so rich that I can do whatever I want with it. I can say for I in A, that means I'm saying that A is a list, or it could be anything. I'm saying that A could be a list. Now, let's say I now come down and say return, or let's say it will print. Let's just print, or let's do I multiplied by B. That means for whatever value you have put as B, it will multiply it. So let's enter. Let's say then it should print. Let's just say C is equal to. Sorry, I'm writing this off my head anyway. I don't have any. Okay. Let's say print C. Now this is not returning any value. Now let's see what happens. Now let's call the function. Let's say list underscore function. A, let's say A is a list of values. Then B separated by comma, B is 5. Let's run this code. Have you seen what happened? Now I said for I in A. Now A is a list of value which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I said for every value of I, multiply it by B. Now if took the first variable which is 1, it multiplied by 5. The second one 10. 2 multiplied by 5, 3 multiplied by 5, 4 multiplied by 5, then 5 multiplied by 5, which means you can impute absolutely any kind of value in your list, so long as whatever you have defined inside the function, in your function rather, so long as whatever you have defined inside that function is in line with the kind of variable you are saying that the function is going to take. Hope it makes sense so far. Remember that as usual, I'm going to share this file in the group so that we can all go back and look at it. All right, now we are done. I think we will still look at functions, but not at this level anymore. We are still going to look at function. Now that is that with function. Now I am going to change IDEs. Please, it is very important that I will teach you exactly how to download this particular IDE. I'm sure everybody has installed Python on their system. Everybody has installed Anaconda on their system. Anaconda comes with a lot of packages, which means that from going forward, we'll be using a particular IDE called Visual Studio Code. I like it for its simplicity. It is very easy to use, and you can add a lot of extensions to it. So I'm going to be we are going to end using Jupyter Lab here. Then we are going to begin to use begin to use an IDE called Visual Studio Code. This is Visual Studio Code. Please don't look at this. Okay, now this is Visual Studio Code. It is similar to what do they call it? The Jupyter Lab. Only this one does not run line by line. It runs an entire code. It does not run line by line. It runs an entire code. Now let me explain. Now, to download Visual Studio Code, all you need to do is you can just Google Visual Studio Code download, basically. Then it takes you to Google, then you click on the link. Okay, this is the link. Now for Windows, you just click this, then download whatever version that you want to download for your system. Then for Mac, if you are using a Mac, you use this. Then if you are using this is RPM, I think this is Ubuntu. This is for Linux, people that use Linux. Red Hat Linux, then this is Ubuntu, this is Debian. Then this is for macOS, this is for Windows 7. Just click it, then install. Now when you want to install it, it is very important that there's always make sure that you check all the boxes. When you click to install, there are about 4 boxes. Make sure all of them are checked so that you can add Visual Studio Code to the path so that you don't get to do it manually. It's trained us to do it manually. Make sure all the boxes are checked. Now when you do that, it will give you something like this. It will not be white like this. Let me quickly do this. This is what it will show you. Now this is the way it will come up. This is the way it will come up. So now when it comes up like this, in order to start, before you start, it is important that you install a whole chunk of extensions. Where is that extension? Okay. Now the first extension you are going to install here is called, you are going to install the Python extension. You see mine is already installed. You need to install Python extension, this Python, then install Python for Visual Studio Code. You install this Python, then install Kite. Kite helps you auto-complete your code. Then Python for Visual Studio Code also assists in some areas. Then you install a very important dependency which is called Code Runner. Now you see mine, I have already installed it. This is called Code Runner. You have to install, once you install Code Runner, whenever you write code here, you see this plus sign here. There's a plus sign here where my mouse is. Can you see my cursor? My mouse cursor. There's a plus sign here, which means that whenever you click that plus sign, it can help you automatically run your code. Now, there's another one called that you install called HTML. HTML code preview. Okay, let me just search by preview. I don't think I have it installed. Preview. Okay, live HTML previewer. Let me just install it once. I don't have it installed. Now, this is very important because at the point we are getting into, we are not just going to be writing code and at the end of the day we'll just see the output in, and no, we'll be working with actual data. By tomorrow we would have an Excel data that we are going to work with. So you will learn how to use pandas to work with Excel so that we will understand how to work with Excel automatically from our code. Then from there we'll now understand how to use Django. Then Django is like a web framework for Python. So we are getting into real work. We have been joking since. We have actually been joking. So now we would also install something called Django. There will be a video for this, by the way. So you don't need to write anything down. So now beautiful syntax and scope snippets. There are so many of them. Then you can use Django IntelliSense so that you can auto-complete your code for Django. I think I should have that one installed also. So this is the one I have installed. This is one I have installed. Syntax, Django syntax, and the like. It helps you work faster and more efficiently. Then we'd also have, I think there's one for HTML. Have I installed all the HTML? I think I have. HTML and CSS. These extensions were made by different people, so they are just supposed to make our life a little easier. That's why I want them installed. Now, in order to start a new project in Visual Studio Code, now it is simple. You simply go to File. You can click on New File. Now you can click Ctrl S. Now in saving this file, you save it as, what we were working with before is we were working with Anaconda and Jupyter Lab. Now we'll be working with an actual IDE, which means we will not save it. We are no longer working with a notebook. That was a notebook. Now we are working with it's more like we are in the real life, working with real life code. Now what you save your file as is, let's call this beginner.py. This is what I did. Okay, we don't need this .py. Sorry. We don't need this .py. Let's save it. We need to save it as the kind of file that it is. Now this is a Python file. We'll save it as a Python file. Then we click on, let me just put it in my desktop, but I can easily reference it. Then we click on save. Okay, why is it saved as GPY? So let me create a new file. New file, command S, beginner. Where's the Python? Beginner dot .py. Beginner.py. Let's save it as a py. Now here, and unlike the Jupyter notebook, when I type, for example, if I type print hello world. Now normally if I type shift enter here, automatically it will run this line of code and show me the output. But in this case, if I press shift enter, it will run the entire page, the entire Python script. This is trying to load via I don't want it to load here. That's why you install that code runner. Now instead of pressing shift enter here, just click this play button. It will show your output underneath. Have you seen that? You see what is printed here? It has printed hello world here. Now I told you before, now when we started using print, I told you that most of the time you hardly use print. The only use case you use print for is to test if a particular line of code is working or if it is not. I'm sure. Is there any question? Oh, 4 questions. Giovanni. Okay, first one. It's not running without extension. Mine is asking, what is asking for? Please, can you unmute and ask? Please unmute your question. Unmute your mic and ask, please.
I've tried the VS Code before, but it's not working.
It's not working on your laptop?
Yes, I need to install the extension. But after doing the installation, it was asking me for manual installation, that is the automatic something is not working.
Okay, see what you're going to do. See what you're going to do for me. Uninstall the Visual Studio you have. Uninstall the Visual Studio Code that you have. Then reinstall it. Check all those boxes that I mentioned. Do you understand?
No, it came with the Python that I downloaded, not that I installed it separately.
Okay. You installed it from the Anaconda?
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to Anaconda. Sorry guys, I'm trying to... Okay, mine doesn't come with it. Mine doesn't come with it because probably I'm using a newer version. So what I think you should do is, try downloading it afresh. Do you understand? Hello?
Okay, I can hear you.
Try downloading it afresh, then installing it, ticking all those boxes. When you download it afresh, now it will ask you if you want to uninstall. Uninstall the one you have, then reinstall. Do you understand?
Okay.
Once you install, now what I would advise is that for most of the extensions you are going to be installing on Visual Studio Code, always, whenever you install an extension, multiple extensions like that, especially maybe kites, close Visual Studio Code and open it again. More or less like restart Visual Studio Code. Do you understand?
Okay.
Restart
Yeah.
your Visual Studio Code so that those your extensions can take effect. If you install an extension and it is not working, please ask me. Do you understand? Please ask me
Okay.
via chat. I will explain to you how you install it and all. You get my point? Now, this is what we are going to be
Okay.
working with. We are going to be working with actual real code now. It's not going to be palatable, but it's going to be interesting because most what we've done before is that we have done most of the basics. I don't like to dwell on basics because most of the time anything we need to add to those basics, I'll be adding with real life code. I will just tell you whenever it's something that I have not mentioned before, I will simply mention it and explain it with code so that it will enhance our understanding of that particular topic. You understand me? Now, let's try something. Let's say we want to do let's say we want to do two we want to create like we want to add two variables like we did before. We simply say a is equal to 5. You see there's no difference. Then we say b equals, I'm still doing the same thing, 6. Then c equals a plus b, the same thing we did before. So I keep pressing shift enter because I use the other one for. Now let's simply print C. Now, in order to run this particular code, I will not use my interactive Python shell. I can do that. I can just click shift enter. Then it will load up a Python shell and keep loading and loading and loading and wasting my time. So instead of doing that, that code runner that we installed, it will bring this plus button. Normally, if you install Visual Studio, you won't have this plus button. But it is very important we have this plus button because sometimes when we are troubleshooting code, maybe we are writing a particular line of code and we are troubleshooting it, we may need to want to test the code on this page first before running it by HTML on the back in the front end. So what I do is I just simply click this plus sign. Once I click this plus sign, you see that it has run my code and it has given me my result, which is 11. It's telling me that 5 plus 6 is 11. So it has printed the value of 11 out into my output section here. Now, let's say I want to create a value called basis. Let's call this basis equals, let's say it's a list. Let's say I want to give you the values 2, 4, 6, 7, 78, 96. I am here. We can put multiple values. I am here. Now let's say I want to print this. I'm trying to explain to you that it is the same process like you are using Jupyter Notebook, but only that you see the difference between both of them now. Now let's print basis. So let's run this code. Now, see the difference. You notice here, it is not printing by line. Rather, it is printing the entire script. It has printed this print statement here. Then it has also printed this second print statement here. Which means when you are using Visual Studio Code, you are not printing by line, unlike the Anaconda or JupyterLab. You are printing by file. It is printing beginner.py file as a file. Does it make any sense? Does it make any sense? Do we have any other question? Please, if all the boxes are not checked, if you are not sure, you can always uninstall and reinstall. You can always uninstall and reinstall, please. Are we there? So please, sorry, I just came in from Port Harcourt this afternoon. I am not going to be able to do the second 30 minutes class. I'm not supposed to even have this class, but I just didn't want to disappoint since we didn't meet up last week. Last week, is it Sunday or Saturday? So I am going to end the class at this point. The video will also be available via YouTube as usual. Then this file will be available. If you have any issue installing Visual Studio Code, I think you should reach out to me via chat. We'll still go over most of the topics in line with what we are doing, but we will not go over it in depth like we did before. Okay? So thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your time. If you have issues installing the plugin, still reach out to me. Still reach out to me, please. Still reach out to me. I'm always available to assist. I will always be available to assist. All right, thanks, guys. So we'll see you again to same time tomorrow, by the grace of God. We are getting to the interesting part. You'll start seeing your code work for you. All right, thank you, everybody.